2024 Republican presidential candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, thanks very much for joining us this weekend. What did you mean about chaos and this race for the speaker?
Look, I like to find the silver lining and opportunity at every juncture for this country, Maria. And the fact of the matter is we have a $33 trillion national debt and growing, a border crisis of historic proportion, and growing dependence on our enemy, Communist China, for our modern way of life. So if that's the status quo, I do think that a little bit of chaos could be an opportunity to actually get our eye back on the ball instead of short-term bickering. And I do think the Republican Party obsesses too much over the question of the who. Kevin McCarthy or somebody else, Ronna McDaniel or somebody else, Donald Trump or somebody else. Instead of focusing on the what or the why, what do we stand for? Why do we stand for it? So what I'd like to see come out of this is a refocusing on the substance of the issues that we actually face and that neither party has done a good job of addressing. And I think that would be the positive that I will help, hopefully, see come out of this through the voice I'm adding here.
Well, one of the important issues that certainly voters care about is the wide open border. And we've had a startling U-turn this week from the White House. President Biden now says he has no choice but to go ahead and build 20 miles of border wall in southern Texas because of funds appropriated for this before he took office. On the same day he said that, however, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas wrote a statement saying there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers in the vicinity of the border. But now he says the administration's policy against building a wall has not changed. A lot of flip-flopping going on here, Vivek. How do you see it?
Purposeful deflection by the Biden administration. It's interesting that the same policies, when Trump uttered those same words, were deemed racist and xenophobic and the thing to be opposed. And yet now that it's become an electoral liability for the Biden administration, they're now coming around to the other side. The fact of the matter, though, Maria, is that the wall now is not enough. The wall is necessary, but it is not sufficient. The cartels are building cartel-financed tunnels underneath that wall. Vehicles are able to drive through. That's why I've said the right border policy is to use our own military to seal that Swiss cheese of a southern border. And then, more importantly, remove the incentives for people to come here illegally. Eliminate federal funding for sanctuary cities. Eliminate foreign aid for Central American countries until they've dealt with their side of this border crisis. And I stand by my policy to end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal immigrants who entered this country unlawfully. That's the steps we're going to have to take if we're really serious rather than virtue signaling on this issue.
Well, it must be that the White House is so scared of the 2024 election that they're changing this policy. I mean, this was one of the first things he said. There will be no border wall on my watch when he first ran for president. And now, sure enough, they're building the border wall.
Well, I do think it's a step in the right direction. It is a little bit too little too late, given the crisis that we've already seen in this country. I'm less focused, though, on slamming Biden because we could be doing that all day and still not have enough to point out the hypocrisies. I'm focused on what we need to do for this country and eliminating those incentives to come over to this country. That's the best border policy. Combine that with using the military to seal the southern border. That's how we'll solve this crisis in my first few months in office if I'm elected.
Well, let's talk about that because President Trump is obviously far and away the leader in terms of the primary so far. What is your path to victory, Vivek?
So unlike the other candidates in this race, I'm not focused on criticizing or slamming Trump Monday morning quarterbacking individual decisions he made. I acknowledge that President Trump was an excellent president, the greatest one of the 21st century. I stand by it. But I have something that he doesn't. I'm young. I have fresh legs. I am from a different generation, Maria. And I think we have a crisis of national pride and national identity in young Americans. 60% of young Americans say they would sooner give up their right to vote than to give up their access to TikTok. That is a crisis in our country. And because I'm 38 years old, because I'm from a different generation, I can reach that next generation, reunite this country. And that's how I think we take our America First agenda to the next level. So, yes, I will honor Donald Trump and his legacy because it's the right thing to do. but I can lead and reach the next generation, which I think is vital for the next president to accomplish.
Well, one of the generational issues that we talk about is climate change, going green. The president's agenda is all about climate change, and that has meant fewer jobs in the auto sector. This week, we saw another strike, the largest healthcare strike in history, a widening auto worker strike that has cost the U.S. economy $4 billion in just the first 2 weeks alone. Continuing negotiations around the coordinated Hollywood strikes that have already cost the California economy more than $5 billion. Vivek, the unions are obviously emboldened. What is your take on all of these strikes, and will the economy ultimately pay the ultimate price?
Look, I don't have a lot of patience for those union bosses who are using their workers as political pawns, just like President Biden is. But I do have a lot of empathy for those workers, Maria, and here's why. We have a triple whammy flailing our economy right now. Rising prices, that's inflation, rising interest rates, which combined with rising mortgage rates, of course, to buy your home, against the backdrop of stagnant wages for workers across many sectors. So yes, that's a formula for deep frustration. So the real picket line we need, the real strike, is not against necessarily individual employers. It is against President Biden and the disastrous economic policies of this administration. Can we fix it? Absolutely. Unlock American energy, drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear energy, put people back to work by no longer paying them more to stay at home. But a big obstacle, and you put your finger on it, is that climate cult that shackles the United States while leaving China untouched. And if we're serious about unlocking our economy, if we're serious about declaring economic independence from China and becoming competitive versus China, we have to abandon this anti-carbon cult in the United States of America and say, you know what, American exceptionalism is about American flourishing, and that's how we're going to lead this nation forward.
Yeah. And we got weaker than expected wages on Friday with that jobs number. We're going to talk about that next. Vivek, it's good to see you. Thanks very much.